Okay, so just a little heads up, we're not using our usual Zoom today, so we'll be logged out after 40 minutes. But in advance, I just want to let you guys know that today's session won't be as long as usual just because of some time commitments, but we still get as much as we can done. Okay, so as I said in the group, today we're looking
Good
at...
evening.
Good evening, thank you.
After 30 minutes, you say?
40 minutes, but I'll let you know when when the warning shows up, just so that you're aware.
Okay.
Okay, so as always, I love it when you guys participate. So feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have something to say, or if you have a question, or you didn't get me clearly. My connection sometimes gets unstable, so if I start breaking, also let me know so that I can repeat anything that you may have missed. Okay, so we've been going through SAT practice test 1, and we've been using this as kind of like a standard to see the kinds of questions that are still being tested on the SAT. If you're new to these sessions, we've been going through just the topics that are on the new practice test, just because there's been a lot of changes. And the College Board hasn't really released a statement like saying what's still on the SAT. So we've been relying on the practice tests just like to see definitely what is still being tested. Okay, I see some new people joined us. So far in the reading, we've gone through, we started with main idea questions. I'll be typing in the chat just because I like typing. So we looked at the main idea questions. We discussed what the main idea is, how to find it. We looked at a bunch of examples of questions. And then after that, we looked at function. And we discussed like the connection that's there between function and the main idea. And we also did a bunch of practice questions from practice test 1. I've been sticking to the test 1 just because I don't want to like finish all of you guys' study materials. So this is mainly what we've been looking at. We also looked at literal comprehension. We looked at kind of the traps that are set, because this is the most straightforward, where they just ask you what happened in the story. So we looked at how to handle the questions, how to not fall for any traps. And then, if I remember correctly, the last session that we had, we were mainly focusing on just like going through main idea and function questions. And then, yeah, that was when we did the literal comprehension. So we've gone through a bunch of practice questions when it comes to these. So today we're going to be looking at evidence. And there's not really much. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so we did look at evidence. I was trying to see if I can identify the questions. So let me ask, I guess by a show of hands, who wasn't here for the evidence? Or if you want, you can like type in the chat. Anyone who missed the evidence session? Because I remember that the attendance for that one is a little bit low. Okay, I was specifically asking because I didn't want to like go through what most people were already here for. So the thing with the new format is that reading and writing are now combined. Hopefully you know that by now. And so there's like less reading questions relatively, and you'd find like you would find that the different, like the questions that are there are mostly of the same kind. Like there's a lot of main idea, there's a lot of function, and that's what we went through last time. And so today, I really want to focus on what you guys want to go through, because we've basically gone through the whole syllabus. So that's why I was asking how many were here, so that if like a huge number weren't here, that's what we go through. But yeah, I want us to first of all be able to tell what kind of question it is, because like I said, I've been saying a lot, you won't really be told like this is a reading question, this is a writing question. And so that's the first thing that we're going to do in this session. Just basically go through the questions so that we can know what kind of question is being asked. And that should be really easy, but it's something that's very important because we discuss different strategies for every kind of question. So if you don't know what question it is, it's very likely that you won't know what to do. Or you won't know which specific approach to take. Did someone want to say something?
Yeah, I say I'm answering the question you posted. Question 1 is what we call a inference questions. No, not inference. Form text, something like that on Khan Academy. That's what they call it. It's reading, yeah, but that's what it's called specifically.
Okay, thank you for that. So this one would be in the writing section because it's to do with the text. And this is a good thing. Thank you for saying that because this is a good way to know. The first thing obviously that you would need to know is it a reading or is it a writing question? Because those are two very different sections and they test two very different things. So obviously this is not a writing session, but just for us to be able to filter out what it is, we might talk about writing along the way. Yeah, so anything that's to do with text, punctuation, or anything that's to do with grammar is writing. So again, I'll be putting little things in the chat. And again, if you want to say something, feel free to interrupt me. So writing questions concentrate on grammar. So it would do with word choice, like I said already, punctuation, or anything that's to do with the text itself. Nothing to do with like the story or understanding the parts of like, you know what I mean? Nothing to do with comprehension. Everything to do with grammar is writing. So writing questions concentrate on grammar. I remember in primary school, we had a subject grammar where we used to look at the different categories of words, looked at verbs, nouns, all those different things. So the main thing that writing is going to test is punctuation and word choice. And you'll be able to tell even just by looking at the options, because you can see A, B, C, and D are 4 different words. So obviously they're trying to see like, can you pick which word is right based on the context of the passage? So number 1 would be writing. You can see 2 is the same. It has 4 different options of words. And so you're being tested on the word choice. Okay, and if you scroll, most logical and precise word, that's still writing. And you can see it's still the same. You're choosing from 4 different words. Same thing here, choosing from 4 different words. Again, the text. And I saw this same format with a lot of the practice exams that were released, that you find that the first maybe 6 questions are writing, word choice questions. And then when you get to like the 7th, you see main idea. Okay, so the approach that I've really been emphasizing is read the question first. And this is just so that you don't waste time. Like you guys are really blessed to not have to go through like a 95-word passage. 95 sentence passage. You only have this is your whole passage. So you don't want to waste time like reading through this paragraph and then reading the question and then coming back. Like that's really going to be a waste of your time. And like I said, it's important for you to know what kind of question it is, because that will really determine how you read the passage, what you look for, what you concentrate on. So let that be the first thing that you do, read the question. And of course, the aim of reading the question is for you to answer the question that we're trying to answer. What kind of question is this? So the good thing about main idea questions, and this would be, I guess, a kind of revision, because I believe most people here, I recognize the names, have been here for the other reading sessions. But also in case you weren't here, this is a way for you to kind of catch up and like see what we looked at. And so anything that's to do with the main idea, of course, there's different words or phrases. Sometimes they'll call it the central claim or the main purpose or something like that. And so everything that's to do with that will include that in the question. Like this one says, which choice best states the main purpose? So this is obvious, but it's just to help you know that once you see this, it's a clue that you're trying to get the big picture of the passage, which is also what it's called sometimes, like the big picture. So if you were to read this passage and summarize it in like a sentence, what would you say? That's what the main idea is. And so when you know that that's what you're looking for, you're not going to pay attention to all the details. Oh, his name was Louis Vuitton, and all those little, it was 2007. That won't matter, because you know what you're getting out of reading this is the main idea. And we also looked at the strategy to take. So like I said, we'll see, I guess, what needs more work done. But for now, we're just going through trying to see what kind of questions they are. And so that's the first kind of question. We can scroll through. So that was number 7. If you look at 11, it asks you what the main purpose again is. So again, it's going to tell you in the question what it is. Yeah. And then you can see from number 8, the word function is in the question. I feel like that's a word that will always be there, the function, when they're asking you for the function. So it's obvious. Once you see function, you're focusing on basically why did the author write this? That's literally the definition of function. So you're trying to go beyond the information that has been given to you and kind of get what the point is. Like if I was reading this passage, what would I get out of it in a way? Or why did the author write this passage? So that's function. Again, question 9 asks which best states the function. So function is also going to have that in the sentence. Okay, then question 10 is an example of a literal comprehension question. The word literal means exactly as it's given. When I say something literally, I mean take it exactly as I'm giving it to you. So forgive the error in the chat, but this is literal comprehension. So whenever you're being asked a literal comprehension question, it's going to ask you according to the text. It might not say according to the text, but the question is basically asking what is happening in the passage. So like in this example, it's what is true about mother. So it's not like what is the function of the word or what is this. It's basically just asking what happened. What did this character say to this character? Or what happened when this happened? So it's basically just asking you word for word what is given to you in the passage. So like I said, it might not say according to the text, but it's going to tell you, it's going to just like straight up ask you like what happened in the passage. And so when it comes to these, obviously it's not going to be word for word, like when it comes to the answers, even though the name of the question is literal comprehension, it's going to be a restatement of what's been given to you in the passage. So that's literal comprehension. It will just straight up ask you what happened in the passage and nothing else will be attached to it. Okay. When it comes to this, so it says illustrates the claim. This would more so be a writing question. So I'm going to skip it. It's to do with the text, the to you part of it. So I'm going to skip this. Then question 13 is an example of an evidence question. Yeah, it seems like we're seeing a pattern. When it comes to reading, the options are quite long because they're kind of trying to explain something. But for writing, it will mostly just be a sentence or a word. Yeah, because it's mainly focusing on like the form of the answer. Like I said, the grammar. So question 13 is asking which finding, if true, would support the student's claim. So this is now kind of you going outside the passage, but basically trying to see like from the information that's been given to you, what can be added that's going to support what's been given. So you find if you've gone through the old SAT papers, these questions were very common. They would ask you to pick like which sentences would support a claim. So supporting a claim is something that's very common in the reading section, but this is a different format just because the passage is so small. It would be so obvious, to pick which sentence is doing something because it's so short. So the format has changed, but the basic, what can I say? The basic purpose of the question is the same. Are you able to see what's going to kind of support the argument that's already been given to you in the passage? So we looked at evidence questions, I remember, and we looked at a bunch of examples, but the point is they're going to ask you to support a claim or refute a claim, but it's something to do with the claim. That's evidence. Infographics is the writing section, and it's obviously easy to tell because it will have a table or a graph or something like that. Okay. And then question 15 is an example of a reading question because it asks you about a claim, like we already talked about supporting the claim. So sometimes you would also find some passages in reading which have an infographic. I think that's what we look at today since you haven't looked at that yet. Okay, so it's asking you to support the data from, or pick which data from the table supports a certain claim. And so this is going beyond just saying, oh, how much was the age scomantum in, what is the percentage found? So it's not like you just like looking at the numbers, but you going beyond and connecting it to the passage, which is why this is a reading question and not a writing question. Supporting a claim, still evidence. Logically completes the text, writing, because it's asking you to, it's more focusing on the textual side of the passage. And I think the rest of these should be writing, completes the text, standard English, obviously that's grammar, completes the text, completes the text. Yeah, I would say most of the questions are writing from what I've seen so far. Yeah, all of these are completing the text logically. Let's see how the end is. Which accomplishes, yeah, everything up to the end is writing. Okay, so do we have any questions so far? Anything anyone wants to say?
I'm gonna try some of the questions as examples.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, so there's two sections like this or two modules like this, but they're basically the same format. So we'll just use the module one to go through it. So today we're going to be looking at, we'll briefly look at infographics. It's not very long. There's just like a few tips that would help you when it comes to an infographic question. And then we'll go through some questions. Yeah, I guess just to cement what we've covered so far. Okay, so far we've looked at the importance of you knowing what kind of question you're on so that it determines what kind of strategy you're going to use to find the answer. And we looked at all of these individually just because, like I said, you can't use the same approach for every question. It's not going to work because every question is testing something different. Okay, so give me a second. So it's going to be... Okay, I'm still monitoring the chat. If you have a question or something you want to add. Okay, are you guys able to see my screen with the infographics?
Sure.
All right, great. Okay, so most of this information is from the old SAT, so we'll be skipping a bunch of things that are not relevant anymore, but we just look at what can still help you when it comes to infographics. So I already said, when it comes to infographics on the reading section, it's not just going to ask you what number was, like if it's giving you the years of the price of, I don't know, corn, you know, it's not going to ask you in 2012, what was the price? Because that's not reading. So everything to do with reading that has infographics in it is going to connect it somehow to the passage. So look out for that. Don't just focus on the infographic. The main goal, the main reason that it's even on the reading section is that you're supposed to connect it to the passage. So that's just something to keep in mind when you meet an infographic question. From the practice test we went through, there was just like one infographic question in the section. And so the first part is irrelevant because normally you would have like 2 sets of infographics and you would have like 6 questions overall on the SAT to do with infographics. So it doesn't come as much, but it's still important for you to be able to come up with the answer and connect it to the passage, because I feel like that's the most tricky part. Yeah. Okay. So the first thing is the wording of the question. So there's different kinds of infographic questions, and some of these might not apply, but we saw a question that had to do with the infographic alone. So oftentimes I said that was more writing because writing would also have infographics and still test like textual evidence to do with it. So I would say we'll look at infographics in reading and look at infographics in writing so that whichever one of the two kind of helps you find the question will be the one. But even in reading alone, we would have questions that only have to do with the infographic. But of course, it's not just going to ask you like, what is the number of this year? There'll be some kind of twist to it, even though it's just focusing on the infographics. So obviously this is the most straightforward, and the wording of the question is going to tell you. They'll tell you either according to the graph or according to this, what is true, or according to this, what would support what's given in the passage. So the question itself is going to tell you what to focus on, which is why this is the wording of the question. So the main thing is pay attention, because you're going to try to connect 2 different things, a passage and an infographic, which obviously have nothing in common. So you have to really see how the question is worded, what's being focused on, what should you pay attention to when you're looking at the answer. Okay. So sometimes you have an infographic question that will ask you about the graph and it has no connection to the passage. So meaning they're not going to tell you according to the passage or according to what has been said. It will just say according to the graph. And so obviously this is going to be straightforward, but the main thing is just pay attention to how the question is given to you. And that, like I said, it's not going to be like, what's the number here? There'll be some kind of reading that you have to do that you have to like take as you go through it. And then majority of the questions are going to ask you about a connection between an infographic and the passage. So basically asking you like, why is this infographic there? Is it supporting something that has been said in the passage? Is it refuting something that has been said in the passage? Okay, so some questions will ask you in what way that the argument is supported or weakened by the infographic that has been given to you. And so to do this, you need the main idea of the graph and the main idea of the passage. And like I said, don't focus on the numbers because they're not going to ask you about the numbers. It's either going to be like a trend. We'll look at that a little bit later. But the main point is you're not analyzing like, oh, in 2010, it was 20. Like it's nothing like that. It's going to be kind of a general picture that you get from the graph. And mostly you'll be connecting that to the main idea of the passage. So we've already looked at the main idea of the passage. And like I said, it's kind of like a summary. I put that in inverted commas because it's not really a summary, but it kind of just states the so what of a passage. Like what is the author trying to say out of everything that they've been given. And then sometimes you'll be asked about a specific claim in the passage. So not the main idea, but just like asking you if something is supported or refuted that was given to you in the passage. And so they might ask you for something very specific and then ask you to see whether the graph agrees with it or not. But like I said, it depends on how the question is worded. And you won't have to like figure this out. Like it's not like going to be rocket science or anything. They're going to tell you what to focus on. But this is just to help you to see that all the questions are not the same. Some of them will require you to look more at the passage. Others will require you to look more at the graph. Okay, so when it comes to data analysis, you're going to have either a graph or a table, and this is not going to be math, like I said. So you have to really learn to not focus on the little details in the graph. And obviously it will be clear. You have a title, you have variables and units, like the graph we saw in the passage. It had like, each thing was labeled. So it's not going to be hard for you to be able to read the graph. And sometimes you even have an explanation. I think the one we saw did have an explanation, but we're going to go through it. So you're going to be told what the graph is explaining, and it will be easy for you to read it. Okay, so the main thing is you have to understand the graph. Like you have to know what variable, is there, the trend of the data that's there, because that's what you're going to need to answer the question. Okay, so now go to the main idea, which I mentioned, of the infographic. And like I said, this is you not looking at the numbers, but you kind of seeing like, what is this graph showing me in general from like a bird's eye view. Okay, so like I said, it will not focus on any particular aspect, but you really have to like just see what's the main thing that this graph is telling me. This is a lot of writing, but the main thing I want to emphasize is how do you find the main idea of a graph? And this is these points over here. So the first one is the general trend. Are the numbers increasing? Are the numbers reducing? So most of the time, it's going to be over a period of time. So let's say the price of corn, I don't know why that's in my head today. You have the price of corn over the number of years. Then if you're going to see the general trend, it's like, okay, is the price increasing? Is it reducing? Did it really drop in a particular year? Those kind of things. So the general trend is just like the increase and the decrease, and not focusing on any of the numbers because that's not relevant to the kind of question that you're being asked. And then the next thing is the peaks. So did it peak during a certain period? Did it really rise in 1 year? Did it really drop in 1 year? And this is most relevant, well, I guess for all of them, because if you're dealing with a graph, you can really see like, okay, why did the graph drop? Or if you're dealing with a table, you can see, okay, this year the number was like very small, or in this area, the number is very small. So focusing on those things might help you, because maybe the passage is talking about how in a certain year, the internet was bad or something like that. So then that would support that. So the point is just see if anything stands out in anything that you're given. And sometimes you'll be given two different variables. So if you're comparing two different things, it's important for you to like see if, let's say you're given the amount of rain in every month or something like that. It's important for you to also see like, oh, is there any specific are there any specific 2 months when it was low? Kind of like comparing, to see if there's anything that stands out. And then the last thing is comparison consistency. So like, again, if you have two variables side by side, is one always low? Is one always high? Are they always increasing or reducing at the same time? So hopefully this gives you like a bigger picture of what I mean when I say main idea. So you're just trying to see, is it dropping? Is it rising? And you're not looking at like the small numbers because they can't ask you about that. This is not a math section. Yeah. So that's you getting the main idea of the passage. Okay. So these are some tips to help you as you are going through the question. So of course, for you to have infographics, then they're important. They won't just give you a graph and you don't use it. So the point is that even though a question asks you to focus on the passage, but it's under an infographic, there's going to be some aspect of the infographic that you're going to use. That's why when you looked at the kinds of questions, we didn't say anything that's on the passage alone. We said it's either the infographic alone or a connection between the infographic and the passage. And specific claim support still falls under that. You're still trying to connect the infographic and the passage. So basically, don't leave it out. It might get overwhelming if you're really focusing on the small little details, because maybe you might not see the connection. But if you're really just looking at the main idea, that's really going to help you. Plus, you guys have a very short passage. So it's not like you have a lot of information to filter through or anything like that. And then from that, you'll be able to see like, okay, does this support something that was given in the passage? Or does it refute anything that has been given in the passage? So whenever you come across an infographic question, pay attention to the wording of the question. I already said that, but it will kind of tell you why to lean on the most, either on the infographic alone or both on the infographic and on the passage. And then make sure you understand the infographic. So like I said, there are going to be different variables, different headings and things like that. So just make sure that you know what it's showing, in short. That won't take you a long time because it's not main, that's not what's being tested. Okay, so just a heads up, we'll be being logged out in like 4 minutes and you can just log back in or just being timed out. Okay, and then the other thing is watch out for answers that have wrong data. So even though data is not being tested, maybe there's just something that's not adding up or it's not accurate based on the infographic. So that's also one thing that can kind of make you get the answer wrong. And I would say it's the same concept. You know, I keep emphasizing that when the College Board has a question that's relatively simple, they try to find like the little things that make people get the question wrong. And that's what they take advantage of. And so you find that the answer, like the explanation is correct, but what's being said based on the infographic is wrong. So the whole point is still look at the infographic, understand it, know whatever trend or whatever peak or whatever specific thing that stands out connects to the passage in any way. And yeah, that will help you when it comes to infographic questions. So do you have any questions? Okay, so we're going to go through just a few infographic questions. So it's going to log us out anyway. So I think I'll just end it manually so that we can log back in and won't be interrupted in the as we go through the questions. So I'm going to stop recording. Okay, so we're going through the infographic questions in this paper just to apply what we looked at. Okay, so we have question 14 and 15. So just to go through what we said you're going to have information that helps you to understand what the graph is talking about. And you can see that there's a heading. Okay, minimize. Okay, you can see that there's a heading at the top that tells you what the graph is telling you or kind of gives you more information. And really, and don't not use anything that's given to you because there's a reason that it's there. Like the College Board doesn't just put stuff. So this will probably have a role in helping you to understand this infographic. So it says credited film output. So this is for the film output of James, Young Deer, Dark Cloud, Edwin, Caraway, and Lillian St. Cyr. So this is the film output. Okay, and you can see that there's a graph clearly labeled. You have the individual, so the person, and then the years that they were active, and the number of films that their output, I guess, in categorized in different things. Okay. So the passage says some researchers studying indigenous actors and filmmakers in the US have turned their attention to the early days of cinema, particularly the 1910s and 1920s, when people like James Young Deere, Dark Cloud, Edwin Carey, and Lillian St. Cyr, known professionally as Red Wing, were involved in one way or another with numerous films. In fact, so many films that associated records for this era have been lost that counts of those four figures output should be taken as bare minimums rather than totals. It's entirely possible, for example, that, okay, and so it asks which choice most effectively uses the data from the table to complete the example. So if I was to categorize this, I would say this is in the category that requires you to support a claim in the passage, or kind of you're trying to compare the passage and the infographic and see what information would make sense. So you're supporting, I say supporting because it says, for example. So it's kind of like you've been given this piece of information that's before the sentence, and then it says, for example. So you're kind of trying to see which part of the passage would give an example of what has been given to you before, Okay, so we're looking for data that would complete the example. So first of all, we need to know what are we given an example of. So this is the claim. I'll highlight this. The part before just says a lot of films are produced. So this time, this sentence says so many films and associated records for this era have been lost that counts of those four figures output should be taken as bare minimums rather than totals. So what this is saying is that maybe this number is not even accurate, like because there were so many films that were produced, like the output was very high, for example. Okay. So the first thing that we're trying to see, let me put this in the chat.
I'm going to choice C.
Okay, I already have an answer. Thank you for that. So I want us to focus on two things. Number one is the passage, the claim in the passage. Because you don't want to just get information that's accurate. You can't just focus on the infographic alone because of the nature of the question. So you have to focus on the claim in the passage and then see what data is accurate. Like I said, you don't want to pick an answer that has wrong information, even though it kind of goes with the claim that's been given to you. Okay, so I'll go through the options. You already have C, so I want to see if everyone else agrees. A says Dark Cloud acted in significantly fewer films than did Lillian St. Cyr, who is credited with 66 performances. B, Edwin Care's 47 credited acting roles included only films
I'm
made
going
after
for another C.
1984. Sorry?
I'm also going for C.
Okay, we have another C. So C is Lillian St. Cyr acted in far more than 66 films, and Edwin Carey directed more than 58. And then D says James Young Deere actually directed 33 films and acted in only 10. So does everyone else agree with C? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Does anyone want to defend C?
Yes.
Mhm.
For one, the claim is that those figures are bare minimums instead of totals. It means that there's a possibility that what really happened was more, and choice C is the only one that states that something could have been more than what is currently stated.
Thank you, that was great. So first of all, you connect the claim, right? That these are bare minimums. And then second of all, are these numbers accurate based on the passage, which they are, right? 66 for Lillian, or is that? Okay, I'm pretty sure I added some. And then for Edwin Carey, I was looking at the wrong number. Yeah, 66 there. And then 58 for Edwin. So this is like really a connection between the infographic and the passage. And the main thing is the claim, right? The claim is what made us see which one is actually true. Like for an example here is James Young Deere actually directed 33. So we have 33 over here. Oh, sorry. This number is very wrong based on the information given to us. I wanted to give an example of something that has accurate information but is wrong based on the claim. I think A would be a good example, right? Dark Cloud acted in significantly fewer films than did Lillian, who is credited with 66, which she is. So the information is correct, but it doesn't support the claim. So always be sure to not like shun any of it, like either the infographic or the passage, because the point of this is to draw that connection. Okay, that was great. So let's go through 15 as well. Then we'll call it a day. So again, information at the top helps us. It says juvenile plants found growing on bare ground and in patches of vegetation for 5 species. So these are species of plants. You might not know this, if you are not a biology person. I'm not a biology person. So this really helps you to know, like, okay, what am I talking about and what's being given to me? Okay, this is a very long passage. I'll use abbreviations just because I don't want to take time trying to read these words. So AMN, IS, and RPB recently examined several plots within a diverse plant community in southeast Spain. The researchers calculated that if individual plants were randomly distributed on this particular landscape, only about 15% would be with other plants in patches of vegetation. They counted the number of juvenile plants of 5 species growing in patches of vegetation and the number growing alone on bare ground and compared those numbers to what would be expected if the plants are randomly distributed. Based on these results, they claim that plants of this species grow in close proximity to other plants, gain an advantage at an early developmental stage. So we have a claim towards the end of the passage, which is kind of like a summary. And the question is, which choice best describes the data from the table that supports the claim? So this is an example of the previous type of question, right? Where I'm supposed to draw the connection between the passage and the infographic. So I'll read through it and let you guys see what you think. So A says for all 5 species, less than 75% of juvenile plants are growing in patches of vegetation. B says the species with the greatest number of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was HS. C says for TL and TM, the percentage of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was less than what would be expected if plants were randomly distributed. D, for each species, the percentage of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was substantially higher than what would be expected if plants were randomly distributed. So what do you guys think? Okay, so let's break it down together, right? What is the claim? So this can be a lot, which is why it's important that we have the passage explanation. So let's just break down what's being done. Right? They're trying to examine a plant community and they see if individual plants, I think this is the main part of the experiment. If individual plants were randomly distributed, only about 15% would be with other plants in patches of vegetation. So kind of like, so individual plants, if individual plants are randomly distributed on this particular landscape, only 15% would be with other plants. So kind of like the plants would stick together. And so they counted the number of juvenile plants of 5 species growing in patches of vegetation and the number growing alone compared to if they're randomly distributed. So kind of trying to say, would they grow together or do they grow better together or do they grow better distributed? So based on these results, then this is the conclusion that plants of these species that grow in close proximity to other plants gain an advantage. So it's better for them to grow close to other plants. Okay, so which choice best describes the information? So we're going to go through all the options. A says for all 5 species, less than 75% of juvenile plants were growing in patches, which it is. Okay, and the main claim of this is that they will grow close to other plants. Okay, so juvenile plants found growing on bare ground. And there's the key, right? This part is saying they counted the number of juvenile plants of 5 species growing in patches. So the patches are the ones that are being supported, that should grow more. And then the number growing alone on bare ground. And from the conclusion, the ones growing in patches should be better than those growing on bare ground. And then here we have the bare ground, and here we have the patches of vegetation, and then the percent in patches. So basically this number should be high, is what they're trying to say. All right, so for all 5 species, less than 75% were growing in patches. This is not supporting the claim. B says the species with the greatest number of juvenile plants growing in patches. So there's nothing talking about any specific species, so that wouldn't support anything. Then C says for TL and TM, the percentage of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was less than what would be expected if plants were randomly distributed. So this is kind of the opposite, because what they're saying is if they grow in patches, it would be better. But this is saying the percentage in patches was less. And then D says for each species, the percentage of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was substantially higher than what would be expected if they were randomly distributed. So D definitely is supporting the claim, right? Because we're saying it would be better if they're in patches. And this supports because it's saying they grow better in patches than on bare ground. So what do you guys think? Does everyone agree with D, or does anyone disagree?
I agree.
Okay, great. So the major thing is figuring out what the claim is. I feel like that took us the longest time, just like filtering through all this information. But you can see that the claim was summarized at the end. And we looked at this when we looked at the main idea. We said that whenever a passage is ending, an author would have to kind of rehash everything they've said. So if you're kind of confused about the claim, go to the last part. It's going to break down the information. And then for us to understand this, we kind of went back and said, okay, so close proximity, which part of this is to do with close proximity? So we kind of worked backwards. You start with the claim, and then try to figure out what it means, and then went to the passage. And it's not possible. You can't get the answer right if you don't know what the claim is, because A is accurate, right? There was less than 75% growing in patches, but that doesn't support. It's kind of the opposite of the claim that's been given. So once you understand the claim, it makes it really easy to figure out what supports it. Okay, so are there any questions? Okay, unfortunately, we have to end early today, but thank you for coming to the session. This session will be posted on YouTube. And in case you missed any of the previous weeks, the YouTube channel has been updated and the link is in the group description. I'll repost it in the group. And if you're not in the group and you want me to add you to the group, you can text me privately in the chat. But yeah, everything is going to be posted in the group. And thanks so much for coming. Hope you have a great evening.
Thank you. Good night.